I can't believe our first hit MIT!
The Spider-Man Brand New Day trailer just dropped, and to put it plainly, the internet is not okay. In a good way. After years of waiting, a trailer leak that Sony had pulled down within minutes before Christmas, and one of the most drawn-out social media campaigns in recent memory, we finally have a full, proper, official look at what Tom Holland's fourth solo Spider-Man film has in store. And there is a lot going on. So before you spend the next hour reading Twitter arguments about whether this is going to be good or not, let's actually slow down and go through everything the trailer is telling us, because there are details in here that are easy to miss, storylines being set up that go deeper than they look, and theories that are now looking a lot more credible than they did last week. This is the full breakdown. The first thing the trailer does is remind you of exactly where Peter Parker's life stands. And the answer is not great. At the end of No Way Home, Peter made the devastating decision to have Doctor Strange cast a spell that erased the memory of his identity from every single person on Earth. That includes his best friend Ned, his girlfriend MJ, and everyone else he had ever cared about. It was the only way to stop the multiverse from collapsing entirely, but it came at an enormous personal cost. What the trailer reveals is that in the years since, Peter has not managed to rebuild any of those relationships. He is essentially starting from zero, and he is struggling with it. We see him watching Ned and MJ from a distance, clearly downbeat, watching them live their lives without him in it. And here is the painful part. They look happy. They have moved on. They are fine. And Peter is the one who cannot let go, which, if you think about it, tracks perfectly with who Spider-Man has always been as a character. He carries his grief quietly, and he never stops feeling responsible. The trailer even opens with Peter rehearsing a speech to himself, the kind of speech where he imagines walking up to Ned or MJ and finally telling them the truth. He never does it, he just keeps rehearsing. That is a really sharp way to open this movie, because it tells you everything about where Peter's head is at without needing a single line of exposition. One of the first things fans noticed in the pre-release clips was the suit. The new costume in Brand New Day is a significant change from the sleek, tech-heavy, Iron Man-influenced suits from the previous films. This one looks much more homemade and lo-fi, with a classic red and blue design featuring raised black webbing on the red sections. Multiple people have pointed out that this is strongly reminiscent of the suit Tobey Maguire wore in Sam Raimi's original trilogy, which is not an accident. There is also a shot in the trailer that pays direct homage to the cover of Amazing Fantasy number 15 from 1962, which was the very first comic book appearance of Spider-Man. We see Spidey web-swinging through the city with someone held under his arm, and the framing is almost a direct recreation of that iconic cover image. That is a deliberate choice. The filmmakers are telling you that this film is a return to the essence of the character. Peter Parker is going through something biological, and it is alarming. Now here is where things get genuinely fascinating. The central mystery of the trailer, and apparently the central mystery of the film, is that Peter Parker's body is changing, and not in a fun way. We see Peter waking up encased in a human-sized cocoon made of webbing attached to the outside wall of his apartment building. He stares at his wrists, looking completely confused and frightened before falling out of the cocoon. He catches himself with a web before hitting the ground. But here is the thing. He is not wearing his mechanical web shooters. He is shooting webs directly from his wrists, organic webs, like a real spider. This is a massive deal, because in the MCU version of Spider-Man, Peter has always used mechanical web shooters that he built himself. He fires artificial webbing that he also invented. That was always one of the ways the MCU separated its Spider-Man from the Sam Raimi version, where Tobey Maguire's Peter grew organic web shooters naturally as part of his mutation. The fact that MCU Peter is now developing natural web shooters suggests that his spider DNA is undergoing some kind of further mutation, something deeper and more significant than what happened to him when he was first bitten. The trailer also shows his senses going into overdrive. There is a shot of him recoiling from the sound of a single water droplet falling. His spider sense, which is already superhuman, appears to have become so acute that ordinary sounds are physically painful. He collapses in his apartment. His powers are becoming unstable and uncontrollable, which means that at the exact moment when a major new threat is rising in the city, Spider-Man cannot reliably trust his own abilities. There is a narrator, possibly voiced by Keith David, speaking over some of this footage about the life cycle of spiders and the concept of metamorphosis. This is clearly the thematic framing of the entire film. Peter Parker is not just going through a rough patch. He is transforming into something new entirely. The question is what? Some fans have pointed toward the Man-Spider storyline from the comics, where Peter's mutation goes so far that he begins physically transforming into a monstrous spider hybrid. Whether the film goes that far remains to be seen, but the setup is definitely there. One of the more unexpected reveals in the trailer is the return of Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner. Peter seeks Bruce out specifically because Bruce is someone who understands what it means to have DNA that does not behave the way it should, and because Bruce is now, apparently, a college professor. This would also explain how Peter ends up back in the orbit of Ned and MJ, who are presumably students at the same institution. What is interesting is that Bruce is seen in full human form, no smart Hulk, no green skin. He also appears to be wearing a device on his wrist that is presumably designed to regulate or suppress his transformation. The last time we saw Bruce in the MCU, he was living as Smart Hulk, the merged version of himself that combined his intelligence with the Hulk's physique. Seeing him back in purely human form raises real questions about what has happened to him in the years since. Bruce tells Peter in the trailer that his situation would be enormously dangerous if his DNA is genuinely mutating further. Coming from a man who spent years unable to control a gamma-irradiated alter ego that could level a city block, that is not a reassuring thing to hear. These two characters have more in common than it might initially seem. Both are scientists, both have power they struggle to control, and both know what it costs to lose yourself to something bigger than you are. Jon Bernthal's Frank Castle, the Punisher, makes his big screen debut in Brand New Day, and the trailer makes clear immediately what kind of dynamic he is going to have with Peter. They are not friends. They might be working towards some of the same goals, but they are absolutely not allies in any conventional sense of the word. The trailer shows the Punisher hitting Spider-Man with his van. Not accidentally, mind you, he just drives into him. And when they end up working in the same space, Peter has to physically web Frank's mouth shut to stop him from swearing on screen, which is both genuinely funny and also a perfect illustration of the tonal difference between these two characters. Spider-Man does not kill. That is not a preference, it is a core principle. The Punisher kills people for a living and considers it a public service. Putting these two in the same movie creates an immediate moral tension that has never really been explored in MCU Spider-Man films before. Every other hero Peter has teamed up with has more or less shared his values. Frank Castle does not share his values. Frank Castle would look at Peter's values and tell him they are going to get him killed. That conflict is going to be one of the most interesting threads in the whole film. Bernthal has been playing Frank Castle since the Netflix Daredevil series, through his own 2-season Punisher spin-off, and then into Daredevil Born Again. He knows this character inside out, and seeing him finally step into a theatrical MCU film is a genuinely exciting development. And also, Scorpion is back, and the dynamic is not what we expected. Michael Mando last appeared as Mac Gargan in Spider-Man Homecoming back in 2017. In that film, he was arrested and ended up in prison, where he threatened Spider-Man and made it clear that revenge was on the agenda. Now, 9 years later in real time and several years later in the story, he is back as the Scorpion, fully equipped with a mechanized scorpion suit and a very dangerous tail. Here is what is interesting about the Scorpion's dialogue in the trailer, though. He is not threatening Peter. He is appealing to him. He tells Spider-Man to stay out of his way, which implies that whatever Gargan is doing, he considers it separate from his history with Spider-Man. This suggests the Scorpion might not be the main villain of the film, or at least not a purely antagonistic one. He could be a complicating factor, someone operating in the same underworld as the actual villain, but not necessarily working against Spider-Man directly. Or it could be misdirection, and he is going to try and kill Peter at some point. The trailer is not giving that away. The Hand is here, and that means Daredevil probably is too. One of the shots late in the trailer shows an unmasked Spider-Man surrounded by ninjas who clearly intend to execute him. These are not random criminals in Halloween costumes. These are the Hand, the ancient mystical ninja organization that most MCU fans will recognize from the Netflix Daredevil series and The Defenders. Their appearance in Brand New Day is significant for a couple of reasons. First, the version shown here is comic accurate in a way that the Netflix iteration was not always. In the comics, the Hand worships a demonic entity called the Beast, an agent of death and rebirth. Given that the word rebirth appears in the trailer's thematic framing around Peter's mutation, there may be a deeper connection between the Hand and whatever Peter is going through. Second, and more practically, if the Hand is in this film, Daredevil should not be far behind. Charlie Cox has been confirmed to be expected in the film as Matt Murdock, though Marvel has not made a formal announcement. Matt Murdock and Frank Castle have a complicated, layered history. Throw Spider-Man into that mix and you have a genuinely interesting street-level dynamic that this film seems to be leaning into heavily. The most talked about unresolved question from the trailer is the identity of Sadie Sink's character. She is not properly shown in the footage, but there is a brief glimpse of what appears to be her character in a hoodie with powers that seem to involve controlling or possessing other people's minds. The combination of telepathy and telekinesis points directly toward Jean Grey, one of the founding members of the X-Men and one of the most powerful mutants in Marvel Comics. Sadie Sink was cast back in March 2025 in what was described as a significant role, and rumors about Jean Grey have circulated since before she was officially announced. The trailer does not confirm it, but the powers on display are not subtle. A confirmed mutant, particularly one as recognizable as Jean Grey, appearing in a Spider-Man film would be a significant signal about where Marvel is taking the X-Men integration. There is also a fan theory that Sink could be playing Mayday Parker, the daughter of Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker from a different universe, who has come to MCU Peter for help. Given the multiverse elements still floating around from No Way Home, it is not impossible. In the final stretch of the trailer, things shift from emotional gut punches to straight-up action, and that is where two more villains make their very brief but very welcome appearances. We are talking about Tarantula and Boomerang, and if those names sound like they belong to a Spider-Man comic from 1974, that is because they basically do. Tarantula is shown fighting Spider-Man on what appears to be the deck of a boat, wearing a heavily armored red and black suit. The design is quite different from the classic comic look, which in the original material is essentially a guy in a colorful acrobat outfit with poisoned spikes on his boots. The MCU version has been modernized significantly, with full-body plating and a more tactical aesthetic. Boomerang, whose real name is Fred Myers, appears even more briefly in what is likely part of the same action montage. His costume in the trailer is close to his comic book look, which is a clean blue and white design. The boomerangs themselves are also present and accounted for, because when you name yourself Boomerang, you have to commit to the bit. In the comics, Boomerang has occasionally drifted into anti-hero territory, and even teamed up with Spider-Man on a reluctant basis. Whether the film leans into that dynamic or just uses him as another obstacle for Peter to punch through is unclear from what the trailer shows. One of the most quietly devastating moments in the entire trailer is easy to miss if you blink at the wrong time, and it is the shot of Peter standing at Aunt May's grave in the pouring rain. He walks up slowly, places flowers in front of her tombstone, and then presses his fingers to his lips before touching the stone, a small and completely human gesture that says everything without saying anything at all. Aunt May, played by Marissa Tomei, died in No Way Home after being hit by the Green Goblin's glider. It was one of the most emotionally brutal moments in the entire MCU Spider-Man trilogy. The fact that the trailer deliberately includes this scene tells you something important about what kind of film Brand New Day is trying to be. One character who has not received nearly enough attention in the post-trailer discussion is William Metzger, played by Tremel Tillman, who most people will recognize as the quietly menacing Milchick from Severance. In the trailer, he is subtitled simply as Bill, but the rumors surrounding his role have been circulating since before filming wrapped, and the inflammatory dialogue he delivers in the footage strongly suggests those rumors are accurate. Metzger, in the comics, is a prominent anti-mutant political figure, the kind of character who uses the language of public safety and national security to justify what is essentially organized bigotry against people with powers they were born with. In the MCU context, his role appears to be connected to the Department of Damage Control, the government agency that polices superhumans, and the trailer suggests he is specifically targeting Sadie Sink's character. If Sink is indeed playing Jean Grey, then Metzger is essentially the institutional face of the anti-mutant movement that the X-Men have always had to fight against. Beyond Scorpion and the Hand, the film also features Marvin Jones III as Tombstone, the crime boss Lonnie Lincoln. Tombstone is a fascinating villain in the comics, an albino with near-indestructible skin and superhuman strength who operates as one of the most feared crime lords in New York City. Interestingly, it is Marvin Jones III's voice that appears to be providing the narration throughout the trailer, waxing poetic about spiders and life cycles in a deep and measured tone that sounds like a man who has thought very carefully about predators and prey. What is notable is that Tombstone does not actually appear visually in the trailer at all. His presence is entirely through voice, which strongly suggests Marvel and Sony are deliberately keeping him off screen for now. In a film already packed with villains, the one they are most actively hiding is almost certainly the one with the most significant role. If Tombstone is the figure operating in the shadows, narrating the story of Peter's transformation like he already knows how it ends, that is a very unsettling piece of positioning for a crime boss. Director Destin Daniel Cretton, who previously directed Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings, is clearly bringing a more grounded and emotionally serious approach to Peter's story. Spider-Man Brand New Day hits theaters on July 31, 2026. This is also Tom Holland's final contracted standalone Spider-Man film, which does not mean it is his last appearance as the character, but it does mean the next chapter is genuinely wide open. And that is everything the Brand New Day trailer is hiding in plain sight. Now here is what I want to know from you. Out of every villain in this trailer, Scorpion, Tarantula, Boomerang, Tombstone, the Punisher, the Hand, and whoever Metzger is really working for, who do you think is the actual main threat of this film? If you are new here and this kind of deep dive breakdown is something you are into, the subscribe button is right there and it costs you nothing. With that said, I will see you in my next video.